if you're either at a turning point in your flight school or you're getting one started, be very intentional with how you decide what happens in the future. It is much better practice to not say, we need to offer multi-engine now. Let's rummage around and figure out where we can get a multi-engine, because that tends to bite you later. And if you shortcut decisions in the long run versus planning ahead, obviously there's a level of improvisation required from running an operation, just like there is with flying. But you want to minimize that and plan for every variable as much as possible. And part of the way you do that is having an incredibly intentional fleet plan. I think it's really important that you plan your capability to be able to train the student that you want to train.
We are super excited to have you guys here, whether you're listening to this after the recording on Spotify, iTunes, whatever it is, YouTube, or you're in the room with us today. So we're super excited. We have a wonderful guest. His name is AJ. AJ is a good friend of mine. We met, I want to say, a few years back. He used to work at a flight school, so he knows a lot about the daily operations of the flight school stuff and how it is. And he has a new product, a new business that he started that we want to share and kind of highlight as well. So one of the things that he's also working on is, as he's doing the leasing company brokerage stuff. And I don't want to give all of it away. I want him to kind of do it. We want to kind of highlight, especially as we come into Oshkosh, coming out in a couple of weeks, the new MOSAIC stuff is hitting up the market. So we have last year, obviously the sport pilot privileges were out there. And now I guess for manufacturers, there's another rollout of that MOSAIC plan. So that's one of the topics we'll be hitting today. But really it's just a wonderful conversation. It's a podcast. So we're just kind of going to talk a little bit and see where this goes. Let's do some housekeeping before this. So if you are with us live, go ahead. There is on the right button here, there's a chat that you can actually type in your questions if you have any that you want to ask me or AJ over there. If you want to be in the podcast, feel free to give us a call, 314-804-1200. Or, let's say you're a flight school, you need some help growing your school, you need some, juice. Highly recommend checking out Right Rudder Marketing. Go to our website, rightruddermarketing.com, book a call with me or one of my team members. We'll do a free consultation, walk you through our flight school marketing system and how we help schools grow. And my last piece of housekeeping here. So I am wearing a nice shirt here, Flight Schools Pro. I picked it up at a trade show, but we are not sponsored by, Flight Schools Pro or anything like that. However, if you do want to sponsor this podcast, please reach out to us, 314-804-1200, or send us an email, info@rightruddermarketing.com. So without further ado, let's hear from the man himself. How's it going, AJ?
Hey, Tim, how's it going? It's great to be here.
Awesome, man. I gave you a small introduction there, but, I'd like to hear it from you yourself. Maybe you can give us a little rundown of who you are, what you do, what you did, and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I primarily work in aircraft leasing right now. I have my own company called Huckleberry Aeroworks. We specialized in matching flight schools with creditors, with investor lessors. Really the way that looks is similar to the insurance brokerage model. You don't see typically you don't work with Star directly for your fleet policy. You work with the broker. And so there's plenty of benefits. I'm excited to get into all of them for working with a third party broker and representing the interest of your flight school's fleet growth demands to the actual investor lessors. So people you've probably heard the names of, like Residco and Wings, those kind of groups. That's who I can represent you to.
Cool. So before you so that's quite the exciting situation. So you're starting your own business. You're getting into the market. I'm glad to have you on the show. I guess there is obviously some lead up that led to this point of starting your own business and going full force to it. Walk us through kind of your experience and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied at Auburn University. It's a great school. Enjoy War Eagle for anybody listening. I ended up firefighting while I was in school. It gave me great access to the aviation community, if you can believe it. And then really beyond that, I ended up working for a flight school outside of the university. Got my feet wet in operations. That was a a pretty quick foray into manufacturer sales. So I represented a MOSAIC-eligible manufacturer doing a lot of their business and regulatory prep for the upcoming MOSAIC rule. And then I kind of on the side started this leasing business, and over the past 6 months or so, it's really picked up some steam and required my full attention. So I've decided to step out on my own and really just take a leap of faith and see what value I can add to the industry through representing flight schools and their interest to investor lessors.
It's quite the journey. We so I mentioned when I was kind of giving you the intro there, we met a few years ago, and the way we met was AJ was working for a flight school, and actually that flight school was one of is and still is. I'm not gonna, still is one of our flight school customers. Blue Skies Above, if anyone wants to check it out. So, I guess let's talk about that progression. Working at that at the flight school, then kind of you went on to do a little more things, then eventually to Huckleberry. Right? What's the name of the current brokerage? You classify as a
Yep.
brokerage, right? Brokerage firm. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So
Yeah. Sorry.
yeah. So I mean, it was a great experience, working with Tim and his team, and obviously, it was a lot of sales. My position incurred a lot of duties. Answering phones, basically converting leads from the CRM that Tim had built us into students and helping them progress through their training, helping them, understand what their goals are, what future careers are in aviation. And then from that, kind of a desire to understand what the future of general aviation was going to hold. That kind of, I kind of had that in my mind of surely, clapped out Cessna 172s aren't the future of general aviation. So what direction is it going to go in the long term? And so that led me to do a whole bunch of research, about different manufacturers and who was going to be a new market entrant, maybe more established and different, foreign markets. But manufacturers that were going to be, trying to make a break into the U.S. under the new MOSAIC regulations. That's going to, greatly broaden the offerings for sport pilots, and then broaden the offerings for what could be technically classified as a light sport aircraft. And so that led me to discovering Shark Aero, and they are a MOSAIC compliant aircraft manufacturer. Unfortunately, didn't get to see them all the way to the finish, just because it's the leasing company required my full attention. But it definitely gave me a whole lot of context, and built up a whole lot of kind of tribal knowledge from studying the rule, from being a part of the F37 committee, from really it being a part of my job, and really required to have some subject matter expertise on what that regulation is going to look like and how it's going to positively or negatively impact the training environment in the future.
Do you think it's going to positively or negatively affect the flight training environment in the future? We're talking about MOSAIC, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely going to be a net positive in the long run, but there might be a sharp that for early adopters, you may feel that cost a little bit more intensely than kind of the long term players. It requires early adopters in order, for that to go into play. But the way I think of it is at a 10-year scale, the aviation landscape is going to look very, very different from what it does right now. I think Rotax and new companies like Turbulent Solutions will play a big role. Sorry, not Turbulent Solutions, TurboTech.
I was gonna say, what is I don't know what Turbulent Solutions is. Please school me.
No, TurboTech, the new turbine. So those power plants, I think will have a big impact, and I think the jury's kind of out right now. Are we going to see a Jet A focused, flight training future? We're going to see a Rotax focused future. So, very.
Yeah, I mean, even was it? I think they're trying to roll out getting the 100 low lead out, aren't they? That's part of the initiative. I don't know. I don't know if MOSAIC's part of that, but I know, and like for example, California, they have some legislation maybe or some processes that are happening right now where they are trying to roll out these 100 low leads. So everyone's gonna have to get an STC in order to make their clapped out 172 compliant. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not too well versed in it, so I don't know. What's is that true, or I don't know?
I'm not as well read up on that. I do know that I think a lot of the legacies are transitioning to DeltaHawk motors, which is a simpler. I think it's they've got several examples that are supercharged. So it's one of the first superchargers in general aviation. And that's going to be really interesting to see. At what time frame legacy airframes start adopting modern power plants and how that actually changes the airframe itself. And then it will be really interesting to see the new turbines. And then Rotax, they've had some growing pains for sure in the market, but just the raw efficiency that they've been able to achieve with a high RPM motor been really, really impressive to see. And there's just something that's definitely worth being stated.
Yeah, I mean, I've never flown a Rotax. I'm I guess Team Lycoming right now, but
Yeah,
but I have talked to people all over the industry, and they really love the 4 gallons per hour model,
yeah,
especially now because of the gas prices and all that stuff.
yeah.
It's insane. Someone will say, "Oh yeah, we just put like 5-10 gallons in the tank and call it a day." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I just filled up 50."
Yeah, it's really amazing, what that allows you to do. I think a big concern right now is useful load. People are like, all right, well, what's the fuel capacity and the useful load after fuel capacity? But then it's hard to understand that you can actually take off safely with 10 gallons of fuel in the tank, and so that's kind of a weird thing to get your mind around for sure. But I mean, I tend to look at things from a training utility standpoint. So, one of the, I guess, concerns that I have about Rotax and its adoption into the training market at scale would be just when you're thinking about RPMs as a piston trainer, you're dealing with a power band that's 4,500 to 6,000 RPMs. Much different balancing that from a mental standpoint. Than a 2 to 3,000 RPM power band that you'd see in a Cessna 180 or something comparable. So I think that there's for people who are looking for something that's immediately transferable into an adjacent industry like flight instruction, or once they get their ratings and they're looking for their first job, it's going to be difficult to come out of a Technam and then jump into a Cessna 340. So that's kind of a thought I have in the back of my mind, is you want to set your students up for the best, up for success and the best next step. So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a bit. So, as an aircraft broker for the flight school market, um, let's say I'm a flight school, right? What type of aircraft should I be looking at if I'm looking to expand my school?
yeah, it really depends on your priorities, your environments, and your infrastructure. It depends on, do you need a aircraft that looks good so that it's a differentiator? I think that there's different weightings of the way you kind of plan your fleet. And so one of the things I really like to do is figure out, kind of what your top line priorities are with your fleet. In 5 years, if you make all the decisions right now, what does your fleet look like? And more importantly, what are you accomplishing with both your fleet and the flight school as a whole? What kind of students are you serving? What does it materially look like? And so, if you're a flight school that is a career track flight school and your goal is to run 140 hours a month in every plane, and you're balancing utilization and maximization of fleet, and you just really are working hard to get the most out of your fleet, I'd still recommend going with a legacy trainer, something that's metal, something that's covered under warranty, something modern, but also has a proven track record of being able to withstand, incredibly high utilization rates. If your goal is, if you plan to fly 60 to 80 hours a month, you want to offer something premium, but also affordable, I'd recommend going with, some kind of light composite aircraft that's probably utilizing a Rotax, something like a Diamond DA-20, something like a Technam P Mentor. something along those lines. And these are just examples of single engine aircraft. I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole about the multi market, and that is a totally different discussion as well. But kind of, going back to that original point, it really just depends on the flight school, and you may have some very serious operational constraints, like you need density altitude, and in that place, a Cirrus SR22T track edition is the only thing that's going to make it work. So yeah, you got to
Yeah.
keep feasibility in mind.
We had a school we were working with. They're like in northern Nevada or whatever, and they're like, I'm like, how do you deal with density altitude? Like, oh, we just plan it out and make sure it works. And I'm like, okay, man. It's like it's crazy. But to your point, we see. Well, I'll say this. I think for most flight schools, it's really important to make this decision early on, especially as you start out, because ideally you would like to have the same like aircraft and engine in your flight school and scale that up. Because if you start, let's say you buy a P Mentor, and then you get, let's say, I don't know, SR20, and then you get a Cessna 172, and hey, I don't know, this turbo arrow is for sale too. I'm gonna buy this. You have it's like 4 or 5 different systems and complexities you gotta worry about. Your maintenance department's gonna hate you. Your parts are gonna be, you have to get parts only for 1 plane or 2 planes, and instead of having a nice inventory for, let's say you were just doing all 172s here, then in that case you can just get all the inventory and all the parts for the same aircraft and model, and you'll be fine. You'll have a supply, and then you can go for any aircraft if it goes down. You don't have to worry about, okay, well, I need to order 5 different sets, right?
Yeah.
So,
No, it's
sorry.
no, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one thing that I kind of wish I could communicate to flight schools in a more powerful way is something I think you probably spend all of your time trying to convince them of, which is your aircraft, the aircraft that you pick for your flight school, it needs to be a proactive decision, not a reactive decision. And more importantly, the type of aircraft that you use has a very large impact on your brand identity as a flight school. And it's not to say that you can't change it down the road, but whether or not you're a Cessna school or a Cirrus school or a Technim school or a Piper school, that actually has a very material impact on how you market yourself, the kind of clientele you attract. And I'm sure, Tim, that's something that you could back me up on, from
100%.
all your work branding.
Full endorsement from Right Rudder.
Yes. 100%.
100%. We just had a school on this podcast, I want to say a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. Their Hawkins Academy over in Tennessee, they run a fleet of 100% RV12s, and it's like, wow,
Really?
it's crazy. It's like, it's insane. I think they're the only one in the market that does that, which is incredible. So it's like, okay, if you're looking to buy an RV for your flight school, check out Hawkins Academy, and pick Matt and Mike's brain over there. So
Yeah.
going back to you were giving a lot of good tips for flight schools, and that's kind of what our core audience is all about, is flight schools and how to help them grow, how to help them scale and train more pilots, making a bigger impact on the industry. With your experience with aircrafts and brokerage and all that stuff, and also working inside of a flight school, you said you had one message you had to give to flight school. What's some other messages you want to give to flight schools as far as how to scale their operations and grow their schools?
Yeah. I would just say, if you're either at a turning point in your flight school or you're getting one started, be very intentional with how you decide what happens in the future. I think the more, I call it being ahead of the plane, and I think that's an aviation term for, for actually planning, actually flying. And I think running an operation is much the same way, just on a much more macro scale, where it is much better practice to not say, oh, we need to offer multi-engine now, let's rummage around and figure out where we can get a multi-engine, because that tends to bite you later. And if you shortcut decisions in the long run versus planning ahead, obviously there's a level of improvisation required from running an operation, just like there is with flying, but you want to minimize that and plan for every variable as much as possible. And part of the way you do that is having, an incredibly intentional fleet plan. I think it's really important to have, especially as airlines and even the Air Force is diversifying with more and more contracts for IFT. Then it's very, very necessary that you plan your capability to be able to train the student that you want to train well in advance, so that you're not stuck paying last minute prices for last minute aircraft, and then then you are struggling with availability. There's a whole cascade of issues that stems from just the single one, I guess, negligence and planning your fleet out. So I would probably say be proactive in all your decision making, and not reactive. And I think the way my business helps out the most with that is fleet planning, whether it's with aircraft leasing, or aircraft sales. We tend to be able to source that, and also kind of help you decide what's the right ratio of leased to owned aircraft in your fleet. But yeah.
There's a couple things. There's a couple good things that you mentioned there. So, one was having a plan. You want to have plan for the future. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive, right? It's kind of a thing we say, but um, one of the things we mentioned, I think, on this podcast, we had a few guests on here. I want to say last year. They're called EOS implementers, or entrepreneurs operating system. What it is they have different guidelines to run a business. For example, core values and right people, right seats, that type of stuff. Writing SOPs. One of the things that they do is they call it a VTO. It's a vision traction organizer, and what it does, it's like you get your leadership team on board, and you plan out for the next quarter, and then year, 3 years, and 5, 10 years, So it's like, I think it's so important for any business that's out there to really be intentional. Look at your plan, see where you're going, meet regularly, meet every quarter, and assess the plan. Is it going in the right direction of where you want to go? Because otherwise you're gonna be stuck with a mixed fleet and high operating costs. And then your bottom line, your top line might be great. You might be training a lot of people, but your bottom line's it's gonna start suffering, because then now you have a mix of students. They're spending more time on different platforms, and then that they have to adjust, just to a new platform. Let's say you're private and you're in a 172, then they gotta, somehow get more training. Let's say they, I don't know, then they switch to a P mentor or something like that. It gets all messed up. So it's like, really be intentional on the student plan and also the business plan, to bring it forward there too. Yeah, it's kind of the first point I wanted to bring up there too. Pivoting from this, so we've been talking about a little bit of flight schools. I know you worked with a flight school of one of ours. You then moved on to, I think you said, Shark. So talk to us a little bit about that career progression, going from flight schools, then to Shark, and then now, and we'll get into the next one, which is the aircraft brokerage.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit of a professional whiplash, but it was a great time. I was the only full-time employee in the U.S. So you can imagine, I was had a lot of responsibility, and not a whole lot of, I guess, on the ground support would be a good way to put that. And it was, I learned so much, through that process. Ultimately I joined because of excitement about MOSAIC, and I kind of, MOSAIC had been talked about for almost 10 years prior. And so it was, it's kind of had been a long time coming, but according to what I'd researched, it looked like it was really going to start, gaining some speed, gaining some traction, with regulatory authorities, throughout 2024, 2025, and now 26. And so that was really what led my decision towards Shark. And ultimately my decision to work with Shark. I was one of the few people in the world that actually gets to pick where they work with. But I actually, I just cold emailed their,
really?
their
You got through a cold email?
Yep, got there
That's
through
insane,
a cold email.
man.
Yeah, it landed directly in the inbox of the director of sales, and I was basically like, "Hey, I'm AJ. I want to sell your plane. I think it's cool." And it's obviously a little bit more sophisticated than that, but I ended up doing about 3 months of free work for them, kind of trying to prove my value. And I'd like to think that I did. Basically everything that I did revolved around actual sales work, such as representing at industry events, Sun and Fun, Oshkosh, Vasana, etc. And then just answering the phone, managing the sales pipeline. And the real reason I joined that that manufacturer, I think, is a good lesson for anyone looking to either get into manufacturer sales or evaluating manufacturers as a whole, which is that Shark was the only aircraft manufacturer that had the safety record that enabled it to be insured under experimental exhibition. And they also had the most traction in sales in the current what the current certification is called experimental exhibition, out of any of the other kind of tandem manufacturers that I was looking at and wanting to work with. And so for those two reasons, it made them very attractive to me, because ultimately, when you're dealing with a manufacturer that's smaller, you want to really evaluate it ultimately for its longevity, not just for its flashiness. Because anybody, I think the whole Icon saga, can show us that anything can look flashy and sell very well, but ultimately, if you don't optimize for longevity, as a manufacturer, then you're going to have a really hard time, scaling your business in the long.
Whatever happened to Icon? I mean, I thought it was a pretty cool platform. It was a seaplane slash. Is it LSA as well, or is it no?
Yes, I do believe it was. I know it was. I'm not as familiar, with what's happening now, but I remember they had, 1,000 reservations and went bankrupt. So
Yeah. Oh, don't do that.
it's
Yeah, don't go back.
yeah. So very unfortunate for any stakeholders. But there's a company out of New Zealand now, I think, trying to bring back a similar design, not calling it the Icon, but yeah, I'm curious. I mean, it's a fantastic idea. Obviously, it sells. It needs to be operationally executable.
Right. I think it's one of the harder ones for aircraft manufacturers is trying to break in the market. And now it's with MOSAIC, there's going to be a lot of them coming out, I mean, off the
Yeah.
woodwork here, especially with this new regulation coming up. Are you going to, by the way, you mentioned you went to a lot of trade shows too. So, Fasana, or now called Fasai,
Yeah.
Sun and Fun. Are you going to Oshkosh this year?
Yeah, I'll be there the 23rd and 24th. Would love to connect with you there. If I'll be there with a few of my business partners, so it'll be a great time. We're excited to meet people.
She said 23. Is that a Thursday or what day
I
is that?
think it's the Thursday, Friday. I'd have to double check.
Okay. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm not going.
I'm
I'm going
behind
there.
the plane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm behind the plane on that one too. We just got I think our RV set up there. I still got to read the FISC arrival procedures as well. I have no idea, but I'm super excited to go to Oshkosh. So I will see you there. And also, anyone listening too, say hi to us.
Yes,
All right.
that's
So you
all.
worked with Shark for a bit, and then I guess you did a lot of prep work. Working at the flight school, and also working at Auburn University too. You did some cool stuff at there as well to kind of prep you to get to Shark. Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. I'd started a student organization there. It's to my knowledge still alive and well. It's Auburn Fit For Flight. So we had kind of a fitness initiative for pilots. It was a great time. We did several events over the course of of operating there, and ran promos with local flight schools. Did partnered with Auburn Peer Support. So one of the great things about Auburn University, quick plug here, is just the student organizations and aviation student body. It's a fantastic organization, and there's so much peer support. There's so much support from the faculty, and I can't recommend enough. I was managing a flight school outside of Auburn while attending as an aviation management student, and it was. And just that experience alone, it was so helpful to have professors and resources to bounce things off of. And that was just such an accelerated growth timeline for myself, professionally and personally.
Yeah, and then so you were at Auburn. Then that helps you kind of you're working at the flight school as well, and then that kind of help you promote yourself and give you you call them value adders,
Yep.
and then and then you apply to Shark, had a great experience at Shark, and then that kind of led to the current thing you're working on, right? Is that the
Yeah.
right path, or I missed a step?
No, it's right. No. Throughout, managing a flight school, we dealt with several aircraft leases, and part of the reason I got into it was just managing the actual lease payments, the agreements. It was complicated, and I kind of felt one day like I was looking at the agreement like this just is so complicated, and I can do a better job at this. And most importantly, I feel like this. I think the underwriting truth was maybe that the problem wasn't the lease; it was the fact that there's a one size fits all. And so, I think that's what I came into the industry wanting to do, was realizing that there are plenty of different investor lessors that structure agreements and deals in very different ways and leverage the kind of tools that they have in their tool belt to create unique leasing ads. And so it's not the same as aircraft brokerage in that there's an aircraft and it costs money. You can either pay on leases by the hour or by the month. There's so many different structures. There's monthly payments with hourly caps. There's minimums, maximums, and who's covering insurance, who's covering overhaul, and then even variations in the scale of each investor creditor. That causes a whole lot of variance in each of in the type of agreement, and also the flexibility of the agreement. So one of the things we've been doing as well is, for smaller flight schools, guys who can't afford a $7,500 a month, lease on a brand new 172, that kind of, we help connect them with private aircraft owners who have interest in getting flight training and actually adapting some of the models we see in business aviation onto, such as revenue shares, hourly payments, to where it basically reduces the risk for the flight school owner. And then, it's a great product, for the end student / lessor. So it's, there's just such a wide variety of subjects that I think, in the same way, going back to the insurance illustration earlier, in the same way, you as an insurance broker have a responsibility to connect the right flight school owner based on their operation and based on your relationships with the right underwriter. And so that's essentially what I do. And I'm honestly kind of surprised that there are not more people brokering these leases like me, because it's actually an industry that I think really needs, a robust middle layer. And so we've been able to create a lot of really positive partnerships between investor lessors and flight schools. And partnerships that, that we see, us maintaining the relationship, and then investor creditors, they collect the rent, and they, underwrite the deals, and they, sign the leases and everything like that. But it's always a good fit. And so that's what we're really focused on, is essentially being a marriage counselor for flight schools and investor lessors.
So let's talk about leasing aircraft for a few minutes then. So you've obviously had a lot of experience working in that environment, leasing aircraft to flight schools. What are some tips? Let's say I'm a flight school and I need to expand my fleet. 172. Make it simple, right? What are some things that I need to know going into this that you might have some knowledge in, as far as things that I should avoid, things I should do if I'm trying to lease an aircraft for my flight school?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a few things come to mind with that. Number one, going back to the original point, it really depends on your flight school. I think each investor lessor has a specific set of relationships, and their buying power with manufacturers are really dependent upon the relationships that they already have. So job number one is, if you have an aircraft type priority, it's matching up with an investor lessor that I know is very intertwined with that specific manufacturer, and has a lot of experience working with that, and their portfolio is made up significantly of that aircraft. So that's, kind of step one. And then step two is realizing that there may be, you need to kind of get in your mind, whether it's a priority for whether flexibility in terms is your priority, or predictability are your terms and priority. And so,
What do you mean by that?
so basically, if you're on an hourly structure, it tends to be a more flexible payment, and your payment isn't the same every month. If you're on a fixed monthly, then usually it can be a higher minimum payment than an hourly lease, but it's saved you so much time, because there's no kind of calculating up the hours. There's no administrative burden with that. And so you have to kind of weigh your opportunity cost of like, paying a few extra dollars on the minimum side. That may that may translate to actual time I'd have to spend paying, either doing myself or paying an admin employee to total up all the hours to collect it all and figure out what we owe the investor lessor. And so for me personally, when I was working in that role with the flight school, I definitely would have preferred for the investor creditor to function more as a bank and less as the IRS. That's kind of how I illustrate that, is like, either you can figure out how much you pay and maybe it's less, or you can have a really predictable line item, and then it saves you all that time, and you just know that that's it transfers the actual access to the aircraft from a variable cost to a fixed cost, which just looks very different on accounting. And that's honestly the fixed monthly models. That's really the model that we see, with flight schools at scale. So, really anybody operating more than 30 planes, it's pretty much the administrative burden is really extreme, to kind of figure out the payments, the hours utilization, and all that. It really just depends on which phase of operation you're in.
Yeah, I think if you're doing like the hourly one, it's like, I guess it depends on how much. Yeah, I think you should compare the two. So if it's a monthly rate, then I would say, okay, how much is this? If I flew 100 hours this month, how much is it going to cost? Because the thing is, like, let's say if you have a monthly rate, let's say you have a bad month. I only fly 30 hours, 40 hours, that month in my aircraft. I still got to pay that monthly rate. So maybe a wet, or it's not wet rate.
Yeah.
Variable with like the hourly rates would probably be better for that school, especially on down season. But then on the other hand,
Yeah.
too, let's say our school's booming, which a lot of schools are right now, especially in the summer. They're just hitting the pavement there. If you have a monthly fixed cost, it's like it might be cheaper.
Yeah.
if your
100%.
school is booming, and they're probably booming because they worked with Red Rudder Marketing, right? I mean,
Heck yeah. No, that's a great point. And it's, I think it's, too often, I think people want to limit their downside, but then in turn, they also limit their upside. So that's kind of what the hourly model does, is it's maybe a reduced minimum downside, or a reduced maximum downside. So you'd be liable for, on say where say the fixed monthly rate is $5,000 for the aircraft. Maybe your minimum payment is $4,200 for the aircraft a month. And it's something like, $90 an hour. I'm spitballing numbers here, but then you're liable for, that covers, to 40 hours, you need that minimum, but then you're liable for continued $90 an hour for every hour you fly above that minimum requirement. So that's basically an investor lessor saying, fine, I'll reduce the risk for you. The minimum amount of risk, to where if you have a downtime, you fly 20 hours, your minimum is 40 or 50 hours, you still owe us that minimum 40 or 50 hours. That payment may be less than the $5,000. But at the same time, if you start killing it out of the blue because you started working with Right Rudder Marketing, then you needed to, then the investor lessor is going to want, kind of to punch their ticket on your ride up. And so you have to make a solid decision about what structure works for you. Is your goal to mitigate your risk as a whole with the fleet, or is your goal to basically scale? And honestly, that's where I think leasing works the best, is when you have an investor lessor that's deeply embedded and the total operational network of running a flight school. And then you're able to kind of take that and use and leverage that relationship that they already have with the manufacturer from buying hundreds of aircraft from them, and you also benefit from their relationships. And then it's a fixed line item. You really aren't worrying about your fleet. It's someone else's full-time job, and you're paying them, on a fixed line item to worry about your fleet and the quality that it's brought to you. So it's been a very, very great model. And also, just full shameless plug here, I get compensated by the investor lessors, and I'm contracted directly with them. So my, services to flight schools don't incur any cost. So that's the way our business is set up. Some people do it differently. Uh, but it's turned out to be a great model and beneficial for both the investor lessor and the flight school.
Let's talk about that for a bit. So, you mentioned that leasing is a great option, but there's other things that you can do too. You can just outright buy the plane, right? I
Yep.
mean, so I guess really quick, is it flight schools? Should we buy planes or should we lease a plane?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the to their original theme of what kind of flight school are you and at what time. There are plenty of flight schools that should, I think, own a portion of their fleet, so that it's on the balance sheet, and there's a portion of it that should be leased as well. So ratios that we've seen at top flight schools across the country are 60/40, owned, leased to owned, and then 70/30. So that's kind of those are percentage splits.
With
And
the former, the being leased. So like 60/40 or 70/30, 60
the
to
bigger
70 is
number being
actually
leased.
leased.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so I mean, when you're operating a flight school at scale, it's just so capital intensive, and it tends to be a kind of an operational deal. And any flight school owners listening can relate, but you want to spray cash at the hottest burning fire at any time, and so when you have that cash turned up, when you have that cash on the ramp, and the only way to get out of it is to sell it, and then now you're dealing with depreciation, you're dealing with brokerage fees, you're dealing with bank payments and liens, then that gets a whole lot more sticky, versus having a plane that's a fixed line item, and you never spent more than a 1-2 months rent deposit to tie up that plane for your capacity. So I think of it as the end product you need to be thinking of as a flight school is not how do I get aircraft, it's how do I get training capacity. And so that itself is different, is a different mindset from how do I, what are my priorities with owning an aircraft. So
I
I mean,
love
if you're a
that.
flight school
It's
that
all about
does,
training capacity. I love how you said it's not
yeah,
about just sourcing an aircraft. It's all about training capacity. I was talking to school like just a couple weeks ago, and they have a really big student body, and they were telling us like, hey, they went down from, let's say, 20 aircraft, and then they went down to 15 aircraft or something like that, and because of some maintenance issues, whatever. But we always kind of think about flight hours per N number per month. It's like, okay, well, they went from, let's say, 80 hours, or sorry, they went from 80 hours maybe on their on each N number, all the way to 150 just because they cut some planes out. But their training capacity was still there though, because they were able to service it, with maintenance and all stuff. But it's really not about the number of aircraft. I kind of am guilty of this. I kind of will classify a school based on how many aircraft they have. But really, it's about the capacity of how well your instructors are trained, how well your maintenance department is, the other operational facets of the business, not just the planes.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a real need to, when I work with the flight school about what's the future of your plan, we look at instructor to student capacity, aircraft to student capacity, aircraft to instructor capacity, hours per tail number. There's just so many KPIs we look at for, what are you achieving right now? What are you trying to accomplish with your fleet? And how can we essentially not sell you an aircraft, but how can we sell you the capacity that accommodates your existing infrastructure best, and also where you want to take it? And so we've seen that there's just a lot of success when you kind of get your mind out of the well, I need this many airplanes, kind of mindset. It's I need to support this many students and employ this many CFIs. And honestly, it boils down to flight hours, total amount of flight hours per month. And so if you're a flight school that does 40 hours a month, I'd recommend owning your own aircraft. I'd recommend reducing the risk as much as possible and increasing the value, even of your flight school, even though your training capacity may be low. And you do that with actual owning assets, which in that case, you want to make a smart buyer's decision, for that capacity. For the flight schools that are kind of at the point between, maybe they own some aircraft, maybe their students own some aircraft and have lease backs with them, that sort of thing. And they're looking to, now they've had an explosion in demand because they're working with Right Rudder Marketing, and they now need 3 more aircraft yesterday. That's the time at which you lease aircraft. So that's that happens more than you think, and you want to be able to ride the demand wave up to be able to gain momentum. But there's a real science to understanding how to ride a demand wave, and also grow with longevity in mind. I think anything, if anything, any investor lessor would not want you to sign on a lease that you're not fully confident you can cover, even if bad things happen throughout the term. So that's the goal, is to make sure it's a sustainable growth model as whole as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a bit. So we were previously talking about Shark, and then suddenly we got into like leasing versus buying aircraft. But that's the perfect segue to where you are now. So let's talk about you own a company, and that's kind of this is what you do on a daily basis, right? This is so what's talk us through like how you formed the company and what you guys offer.
Yeah, so I mean, really, it's just me and my wife. We're enjoying it together. We, she does marketing, and I do all the operations. Essentially, it's just having conversations like this. It's talking with flight school owners day in, day out, facilitating agreements. It's just making sure that whenever we set up a partnership between a flight school and investor lessor, we try to keep those relationships in line. So I think that's a big thing that's just been a learning curve for me, personally, as I grow the business. Is, it's really helpful to, as long as the priorities of each investor lessor they remain aligned with the priorities of the flight school, that needs to be the relationship. They need to work together, and it needs to not be me just, outsourcing at every turn. So I think we're not just trying to create single, or 1 to 3 aircraft transactions, and then it's off to whenever you need to expand again. We're just going to punt it off on the highest bidder, investor lessor, for the next opportunity. So if you're with Peregrine Howard Aviation, then you're going to be staying with Peregrine Howard Aviation, as long as that agreement works well for you. And you can have confidential conversations with me if that's not working out for you. But usually, as long as that initial setup is right, these arrangements stay together. And that's what I'm focused on, is making sure. There's a lot of the investor lessor side of the business is growing, and so it's very important to make sure that we're managing relationships on both sides and not stepping on anybody's toes. Especially with investor lessors that have long-standing and very productive relationships. We don't come in there trying to take a sledgehammer to it. We're trying to make sure all the agreements are fair and ethical, at the kind of at its root. Kind of the top line value. It needs to all be fair. It needs to be flight schools making money and investor creditors making money, and then it needs to and then at the end of the day, it also needs to be to be the right structure with the right flight school with the right investor lessor. So it's about the longevity of the relationship, and then obviously it's just easy to tell which relationships aren't fair or not. So that's why it's helpful to have an extra set of eyes on it, at least.
So your recommendation is, if you are going to lease aircraft at your flight school, you work with investor lessor, and then as you expand your school, you continue to work with the same investor lessor rather than just try to find another person to lease you aircraft. Is that correct?
And usually, I mean, it's kind of I would just say, as you are paying lease payments, you're accruing relational equity with that investor lessor. And they are with you as well. It's a two-way street. And the best partnerships, it's kind of for the same reason why you don't want to switch insurance brokerages all the time, is because, that relational equity will get, kind of tossed through the mud, and then your rates will be affected. And so, you want to, maintain kind of some loyalty. And the reason I say stay with investor lessors is because most of these guys are in the habit of they would like to buy, given the excuse that you can give them. So if you're like, hey, I'm ready to put on 3 more Cessna 172s within the next 2 quarters, then present that opportunity to me. I'll present it to them. And, or if you've got an existing relationship, present that directly to them, and they will work with you. And over time, the rates will get better. Your terms, your investor lessor will get more comfortable with you. So they will understand that you're not an inherent risk as bad as maybe it was in the first foray into it. So all these guys are trying to build long-term relationships for the exact same reason and in the exact same structure as somebody like your bank would. It's helpful to have a long-term relationship with your banker, because they learn you and they know you, and it's hopefully it's for the best. But that's what we focus on, is making sure that you're not going directly to the wrong person. You should be going directly to the right person and forming a long relationship with them.
So we are coming up towards the close of our podcast. We're almost been talking for an hour. We have 10 minutes left here. So I want to talk a little bit about your business, give you kind of the floor to, do some call to actions, give you the plug here. So, you primarily lease aircraft and you also sell aircraft. Is that true or no?
Yeah, we're getting more and more segmented, away from the aircraft sales world, just because the leasing volume has just, I think the flight school industry as a whole and aviation training industry as a whole is really wanting, on a macro move, to have an advocate, to not feel, kind of like they're isolated in an audience before the investor lessor. And that's just my goal, is to at the end of the day, be a good rubber stamp, be somebody who sees a lot of leases come across my desk, sees a lot of deals, and I understand what's fair across, a lot of different structures, especially for aircraft values. And so, that's where, starting with aircraft sales, you understand values. And then when you understand how those values correspond to the leasing rates and what kind of costs the investors are dealing with and how they're structuring things, then you're able to give kind of a guarantee of like, hey, this is a good deal for this aircraft. And I don't actually have any kind of conflict of interest in saying that. My goal is just to set up long-term relationships between you and the right lessors, and we want to be there for, not just the first first relationship, but we would like to be the first point of contact whenever you grow. And if you get to the point where you feel confident enough to just reach out to your investor, partner in aircraft, and bypass me, then that's the point at which I know that we've done a good job. Because of your confidence in that lessor that's been built over, kind of in the sandbox of working with me. So I guess closing out, I'd like to, just invite you guys. I'd love to hop on a call. I'd love to talk about the future of where you want to bring your fleet. I see a lot of cool things in my job, as you might imagine. People who are applying for and getting approvals from Air Force IFT contracts, people who are, getting contracts from foreign airlines. So there's all sorts of ways to kind of bring up that bottom line, in demand, and really what you're doing on the fleet side of things has a massive impact on even just your eligibility for those sorts of contracts. So, we can get very, way down into the weeds of your fleet makeup and how to really optimize it for what your goals are for growth long term.
Awesome. How would someone get to know you and reach out to you if they're looking to, expand their fleet? How do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, I think best place to go is just our website, huckleberryaero.com. My phone number and email are posted at the bottom of every page. You can also fill out a form. Yeah, we just I think a phone call probably is the best first step. I think I think it'll be linked in the bottom of the video description, maybe.
I don't know. We got to give us your number. What's your number, sir?
Well, no, the link to the
website.
website.
Yes. Yeah, that was in the bottom. HuckleberryAero.com. Check that out.
Yeah. So inspiration for that was I grew up loving Tombstone. So any Tombstone lovers out there, give me a shout. With Doc Holliday. Tim isn't educated, so
I'm not educated on. I don't know what you're talking about here. I know Huckleberry Finn. That's why I'm like, oh,
no,
okay.
No, it's Doc Holliday. I'm your Huckleberry, man. You doesn't ring a bell?
Doesn't ring a bell. I'm sorry.
Come on, man.
Oh yeah,
No,
I got to get schooled on that.
Get it.
Probably some people in the audience could hear it. Yeah, pick up the phone and call them. By the way, this is before I kind of want to ask this question too. Like, when you say pick up the phone, do you do this or do this?
I do this.
Okay.
But
that's a true test.
I think I have a conspiracy theory that I think it's a pilot thing. Because
Really?
like my wife's dad was a fighter pilot, and he talks, everything he says is,
I do that. Yeah, you want to fly a plane like this, and you go.
We're gonna go to McDonald's, and then we're gonna
do a barrel roll. Yeah, I do that too, actually.
And so I think it corresponds. Yeah, exactly. It corresponds to the phone, but I think it's funny.
Pick up the phone, guys. Speaking about phone numbers, if you are a flight school and you are looking to grow your school, highly recommend checking out Red Rudder Marketing, 314-804-1200, redruddermarketing.com. We are so happy that AJ was on our podcast. Thank you so much, AJ. If you want to be on the podcast, want to sponsor the podcast, whatever it is, info@redruddermarketing.com, 314-804-1200. Check our website out. We will be at Oshkosh in a couple of weeks, so we are super excited. Come say hello to me and my team. We will be out there. We do not have a booth. We'll be walking around. So send us a message on Instagram or something like that, and slide into our DMs. And then we'll see you guys there. So without further ado, thank you so much, AJ. It's been a pleasure having you on at our podcast. We're looking forward to seeing you at Oshkosh, and for all you guys out there too, keep training more pilots. See you guys around.